This is William Garvey, editor-in-chief of Business and Commercial Aviation magazine. Today our guest is Aaron Hollander, the chairman and CEO of First Aviation Services, a Connecticut company whose subsidiaries provide repair and overhaul, rotables management, and related engineering services to business, airline, and military aviation worldwide. Aaron, we did an interview about business aviation's prospects a few years ago, as you recall. You were pretty upbeat then. Are you still, and why or why not?
As optimistic or even more optimistic than I was before. We see tremendous opportunity in the commercial part of the market, developing middle class around the world, and need to travel, and just a massive expansion of commercial air travel around the world. Millions and millions of people every year getting into an airplane for the first time, and I think that's a long-term exciting opportunity. We're still very optimistic in the corporate market, despite the last few years being quite difficult. We see the recovery coming now, but looking long-term, the world is becoming more and more global, and despite short-term trade disputes and issues that are serious and need to be developed, business is going to be global, people's lives are going to be global, and aviation is the mass transit system for the world.
What are the biggest challenges and I guess threats to supply and service companies like yours?
Our biggest challenge actually is the U.S. government. Our number one competitor is the U.S. government, and that comes from on the aftermarket support and service side, very candidly with the FAA not enforcing the regulations, specifically one known as 21.50b that requires the OEMs to provide the manuals, what is referred to as the instructions for continued airworthiness, ICA. And this is the law of the land, and more we're seeing OEMs not complying, and we're not seeing the FAA enforce the rules. And this isn't good for air safety. It's not good for the cost of air travel. It's an inefficiency in the system, and we really hope to see the FAA improve it. On the government side, the DoD, we see the same issue. We see massive spending, and your sister publication, Aviation Week, has been following our efforts there. We see the government not enforcing its rights to intellectual property, and we have examples of where the government has been sole sourcing parts for 60 years when they should be opening them up to competition. And we believe competition is good for the warfighters. They're going to have better products, safer products. The money's going to be put into developing new weapon systems rather than supporting monopolies. So for us, the number one issue we have is the government, both the FAA, Department of Defense, Homeland Security, enforcing the regulations. And that will increase competition, it will grow the market, and we believe it's better for air safety.
And when you refer to OEMs, the original equipment manufacturers, you're talking about airframers, prop makers, and engine makers?
Absolutely, in all cases. And within that, we have bilateral agreements, and it's an issue that we hope gets some attention during these trade discussions. Particularly, many of the international OEMs and European OEMs are not complying, and even though the bilateral agreements and the regulations say they must comply with providing the ICA to either the operator if it's an airline or to the U.S. government if it's a DoD or Homeland Security aircraft, or a private owner if it's a commercial aircraft, they must make that ICA available. So it's prop manufacturers, it's engine manufacturers, it's airframe manufacturers. Everybody's trying to keep their monopoly, and we respect that, but it's not good for the traveling public, it's not good for air safety, and it's not good for just the competitive environment and developing, innovating new products.
A bit of a departure here, but you are a very accomplished pilot with an ATP, several jet type ratings, along with helicopter, seaplane, and glider ratings. And recently, you added a drone pilot rating. Is that the start of a new business for you?
It's more of a goal that I set, that when this does become commercialized, that I want to have that experience and be one of the first to go through that process. And if you're already a pilot, candidly, it's pretty straightforward. It's pretty easy to get it. I've encouraged a lot of other people to get their commercial UAV license as well. But for me, I think most of my time is going to be spent actually in the cockpit of the airplane, so that's what I enjoy the most. I love the UAV market. I think that every industry is going to be touched by it. I know the cargo gets a lot of attention, but it's just every day you read about someone else who comes up with a really creative application for using these UAVs, and I think it's going to continue to grow. Where we're going to be able to make money on it, I think the jury's still out on that. It's a very fragmented, highly competitive market, but it's an enormous industry. It's exciting to see how many drones have been sold, how many pilots that we have in such a short amount of time that are UAV qualified. So we're going to continue to watch it, and hopefully we will find some opportunities.
We've been speaking with Aaron Hollander, the head of First Aviation Services. I'm William Garvey, editor of Business and Commercial Aviation magazine. Thanks for your interest.